Hello, Bay Ridge. Welcome to another edition of After Hours. This week, I wanted to dive a little bit more into the idea about confessing Christ, owning Christ, if you will, in the midst of a hostile culture. We had looked on Sunday at the faithful saying, the last of the faithful sayings, and I hope it was encouraging as we look at the faithfulness of God, even when you and I are faithless. But we do have to remember this is in the context, and as I was mentioning on Sunday, that Paul is calling Timothy and us to a bold, unashamed confession of Christ, even if it costs suffering. And it's getting to be more and more difficult because we live in a culture that is in fact becoming hostile. But we do need to remember there is that third part of the faithful saying where it says, if we disown him, he'll disown us. And as I spoke, I think ultimately that's dealing with what happens at the judgment throne, so to speak. But we do need to recognize there is a strong warning there for us and owning up to and confessing Christ in the midst of even a hostile culture. And it ultimately is traced back to Jesus' words in Matthew 10 or in Mark chapter 8. And so I'm going to quote just for a second to kind of line us up with this. Jesus tells us in Mark chapter 8, verses 36 to 38, what good is it for a man to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of him when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels. So notice Jesus there says, look, it's a hostile culture. It's a sinful and an adulterous generation, but you cannot be ashamed of me or of my words. And we are living in the midst of a sinful and adulterous generation, and it's trying to make us want to be ashamed of Christ and his words. And so I want to just go through a few areas where we see this coming up in our culture that are making it harder for us to confess Christ publicly or to be ashamed of Christ and his words. Number one is we hear constantly, there are many ways to God. All religions are basically the same. You can't just believe that there is only one way to God. But Jesus himself says, I am the way, the truth, the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now we have a simple choice. We can either confess that that is true, or we can be ashamed that that is true. Actually, we have to point out to everyone, no, Christianity is the opposite of all of these other systems and beliefs. They are not the same, and we cannot compromise. When we speak that truth, there is going to be blowback. People are going to be upset, and we just simply have to say, so be it. I don't have a choice. My Lord said he is the only way. No one comes to the Father except through him. A second area is, in our culture, it's very popular to say there is no such thing as truth. There's your truth, there's my truth, but we can't say that there is the truth. Now, actually, Oprah a few years ago was big into, she kind of helped mainstream this idea, but it actually goes far, far back. It's not something that Oprah came up with. It has deep, deep roots. And people want to say there is no objective truth and standard. But we have to say, I'm sorry, I'm not speaking my truth. I am speaking the truth. It's not that Jesus is the only way is my truth. It is the truth. It's not that there is only one God is my truth. It is the truth. It's not that the Bible is the Word of God is my truth. It is the truth. And we have to stand by that. People may get upset, but make no mistake, truth is real. And it's important for us to stand that, because that leads to the third area where we're going to have to confess Christ and his words, and is very unpopular today, which is people want to say there's no such thing as right and wrong, and morals are actually only a power play to try and control other people. You say you believe this is right or wrong, but that's really just because you're trying to exert control over other people. And we have to look at the person and smile and give them a hug and say, that is utter nonsense. That is absolutely not true. Everyone has a moral system. And we see around us when big things happen like 9/11, or even now with the invasion of the Ukraine, suddenly people who said there was no right and wrong want to use terms like this is wrong, this is evil, we must stand up against this wrong action. Well, there either is right and wrong or there is not right and wrong. But here's a little fact. Everyone has a moral system. Everyone believes some things are true and some things are false, some things are right, some things are wrong, some things are good, and some things are evil. And the whole idea of saying, no, all of that is just one group trying to control another is utter nonsense. It is complete, unadulterated foolishness. And it is people who are actually wanting to exert power and control by saying everyone else is just trying to exert power and control. And we have to recognize and stand up and stand for the words of Jesus and say, God has revealed truth. He has revealed right and wrong. It's not developed by society. It is given by God, and it's actually revealed out in creation. We can see it. Romans 1 tells us there are things that we can't not know. We know there is a God. We know we are going to be held accountable. We know there is right and wrong, and we've got a pretty good idea of what it is. All of this is available to all humans. They will laugh, they will mock. We stand by the truth. Exactly what Jesus did before Pilate, when Pilate was like, what is truth? And Jesus said, I've come to bear witness to the truth. It doesn't matter whether Pilate denies it's there. The truth was standing in front of him. Now, this leads in our current culture to two other areas that I will bring up, but they are part of the Word of God. They're part of Jesus's words. One of them in our culture right now is the lie. Human sexuality is fluid. There is no such thing as sexes. This isn't determined biologically. You can love is love, and you can love whoever you want, and all these kind of things. Now, what's kind of funny, of course, is this is exactly the opposite of what was used just back 5 or 6 years ago in arguing to bring in gay marriage into our culture. Back then it was, you were born this way, you have no choice. How can you say people can't act on their impulses when they were born that way? Now what we're being told is how you are born doesn't matter. Well, here's the reality. Our genetics matter, and there is right and wrong. And so who I am is down in my genes, and I am responsible for my behavior and whether I act on my impulses or not. Friends, you and I are called to be compassionate. We have to be compassionate with people who are trapped in error. We'll be looking at that some this coming week. And I want to be clear, we must be compassionate. We are not here to try and blast things, but we have to be honest as well. I'm a human being. If I tell you I'm an aardvark, that's not an interesting position. It's not a possibility that can be explored. It's utter foolishness. And if I really, really believe it, you should pray for me and hopefully get me some mental help. Because the fact is, it doesn't matter how I feel. My genetics, every cell in my body tells you I'm human. I can put them under a microscope and a scientist can look and say that's a human, not an aardvark. The same way a scientist can put it under a thing and say, I am a male, not a female. It doesn't matter how I feel. God in the beginning made them male and female. That's the work of God. That's what God has done. Now, to say this, we're going to be called bigots. We just have to own up to that and accept that. But if you're called a bigot for recognizing that the emperor has no clothes, so be it. But don't say that the emperor has clothes, because he does not. And to do so is actually us being ashamed of Christ and his words before men. Last area that I'll bring up is the area of abortion. It is raging. Unfortunately, the legislature here in Maryland the other day just passed legislation that is putting forward. Now the Senate's going to do it, and then it'll go to the governor. But they say they've got a veto-proof majority, and it's to enshrine abortion in the Constitution. Now, of course, what they're really trying to put in the Constitution is what they're referring to as reproductive choice. That's foolishness. It's not reproductive choice, it's murder. Plain and simple. It is the willful killing of a human being. And those who argue otherwise have a broken moral compass. There is no in-between on this issue. It is very straightforward. To argue and support and work for the legislation of abortion, To stand by and not speak up regarding abortion is to support murder. It is nothing less than that. It's not excruciating. It's not a hard personal choice. It's clear to anyone who's looking and whose moral compass is not absolutely shattered and broken. It is the killing of a human being in the womb. Now, when I say that, I'm going to be called anti-woman. I'm going to be told I'm repressed. I'm a Neanderthal. I'm a byproduct from a bygone age. So be it. I'm not in favor of killing little human beings. I will be known for that. If that makes me anti-woman, then you can label me anti-woman. I am not in favor of killing little preborn human beings. If that makes me repressed or a byproduct of a bygone age, so be it. But I'm still going to stand here with my last breath saying, we cannot kill little human beings. It is wrong. It is an evil moral choice. And I will stand before this wicked, sinful, adulterous generation, and I will hold to these things. Jesus is the only way. There's only one God. Jesus is the only way to him. There isn't your truth, my truth. There is the truth. There is not such a thing as there is no right and wrong. There is that which is good and there is that which is evil. Humans are born, male or female, and we are called in marriage to the opposite sex. Everything else is outside the will and the plan of God and his expression of our fallen nature, not of the way we're created. And finally, abortion is nothing less than murder. I've just brought up a few. There are others we could look at, but notice, again, I want to remind you, Jesus said we may not be ashamed of him or his words before this adulterous and sinful generation. It was not popular in the days of Jesus. It's not going to be popular now. Again, we're not trying to be argumentative. We're not trying to be harsh. I'll be talking about that a lot this week coming up. But we have to stand for the truth. That is what Jesus is calling us to do. And to do so, there will be a price to be paid. But I would hope to think that all the people who stood firm against the Nazis are now glad that they did, rather than compromising with moral evil. And we don't want to compromise with it either. We want to be found standing for the truth. Brothers and sisters, I hope this helps you and encourages you in your walk. I look forward to us gathering again this week in worship as we'll continue in our study of 2 Timothy. God bless. Have a great week.